The fortress shouldn't exist. General Chen Tang's army crests the ridge. Below, beyond the Talus River cutting through the Kazakh steppe, stands something that violates everything he knows about warfare. He's marched 5,000 kilometers for this moment, crossed the desert of death, climbed passes so high men cough blood and see visions, forged an imperial edict, treason punishable by death, all to destroy Zhiji, the warlord who's humiliated the Han Empire for 2 decades. But those walls, those outer walls shouldn't be there. Chen Tang has spent 30 years studying every fortress from the Pamirs to Parthia. He knows rammed earth, adobe, stone. He knows Central Asian fortifications, those interlocking wooden logs forming precise military engineering. That's not from here. That's from somewhere beyond his maps, beyond the known world. Then the gates open, and Chen Tang's heart stops. Cavalry emerges first, standard barbarian theatrics. He's seen this 1,000 times, but what follows has no place in Central Asia. 100 men march out in formation so perfect they move like a single creature. Large rectangular shields locked together with mechanical precision. Not tribal chaos, not horse archers. This is synchronized, regimented, professional. Empire-level training from somewhere far away. Chen Tang doesn't know it yet, but he's about to fight the strangest battle in human history, a collision between military systems that should never have met. The question historians will argue about for 2,000 years, are those the ghosts of Rome's worst disaster? It's 53 BC, Rome's richest man is leading 42,000 soldiers into the Parthian desert. Marcus Licinius Crassus doesn't believe in omens. Fatal mistake. He's not defending Rome. He's feeding his ego. Pompey conquered the East. Caesar's carving up Gaul. Crassus remains the third wheel. The merchant among warriors. The math looks simple. Parthian General Serena has 10,000 cavalry. Crassus has 42,000 heavy infantry. 4-to-1 odds. But the Parthians don't fight the way Romans expect. They don't engage. They orbit, like wolves just beyond reach. Imagine being a legionary that day. You've trained for close combat. The shield wall, the gladius thrust. Your tactics assume enemies who'll meet you blade to blade. These enemies won't come close. Wave after wave of arrows darken the sky, launched from composite bows that outrange anything Rome possesses. The Parthian cavalry circles beyond Roman reach, firing endlessly. When legions advance, horsemen retreat, still shooting. The Parthian shot that will become legendary. Hour after hour, the sun turning desert into an oven, water running out, arrows finding gaps in armor, in formation, in courage. Auxiliaries break first. Panic spreads like plague. When Romans are finally exhausted, delirious, when discipline cracks, the cataphracts charge. 1,000 heavy cavalry, men and horses armored in steel, smash into 42,000 demoralized infantry. The slaughter is biblical. 20,000 Romans die in the sand. 10,000 escape westward. Crassus is killed during false negotiation. His head severed, mouth filled with molten gold. But here's where history turns strange. 10,000 legionaries are captured alive. Professional soldiers who know Roman tactics, weaknesses, plans. The historical record goes silent. The Parthian Empire faces a dilemma. Execute 10,000 trained soldiers. Wasteful. Keep them near Roman territory. Suicide. So according to Pliny the Elder, the prisoners are sent to Margiana, the absolute eastern edge of Parthian control. Ancient Merv, impossibly far from Rome. For 17 years, these men serve their captors on the frontier. They guard oases, protect caravans, marry local women, raise children who'll never see Rome. But muscle memory doesn't fade. The testudo formation drilled 10,000 times. The synchronized shield movements, the Roman way of war, burned deep into instinct. In 36 BC, a desperate warlord named Zhiji flees west after losing a civil war. He needs professional soldiers, real infantry who can hold ground. The Parthians have trained men they're willing to rent out. The collision course is set. Chen Tang grew up so poor he survived by begging. Poverty that breaks most men made Chen Tang hungry. He educated himself obsessively. Every detail of frontier politics, every tribal alliance, every weakness in every kingdom. Knowledge became his only weapon. Now he's vice commander of the Protectorate of the Western regions, the Han Empire's foremost expert on Central Asian affairs. Intelligence reaches him about Gigi's fortress. Chen Tang sees opportunity. Gigi has spent 2 decades humiliating Han diplomats, killing envoys, threatening vassals, but his fortress sits 5,000 kilometers away. Any official expedition needs years of planning, imperial approval, massive logistics. By then, Gigi could flee or die. 6 months means losing everything. Chen Tang forges an imperial edict in the emperor's name and starts conscripting 40,000 soldiers. Pure treason. When Gan Yanshu discovers the forgery, his face goes white. This is the kind of crime where they execute your entire family. Chen Tang confronts him with steel in hand and ice in voice. The arrow is already on the bowstring. Do you intend to stop them alone? It's not a question, it's a dare. The machinery of war is already moving. Gan Yanshu joins the treason. 2 columns advance across terrain that's destroyed armies. 10,000 elite Han soldiers in full lamellar armor. 30,000 auxiliaries from vassal kingdoms. The columns cross the Pamirs, through passes where air is so thin soldiers collapse, where frost forms on eyebrows in summer. They maintain iron discipline, no looting, no attacks on locals. Kangju nobles who hate Gigi's brutality begin defecting, providing intelligence and supplies. When scouts report the Han invasion, Gigi can't believe it. His advisors urge immediate flight. But Gigi fears leaving means Kangju ambushes. He makes his stand. Gambling the Han army will exhaust supplies. Desperate, he sends envoys offering his son as hostage. Chen Tang's reply is poetry wrapped around a death sentence. The Son of Heaven has sent us to welcome you back. Everyone knows what those words mean. When Chen Tang sees the fortress, 30 years of military experience scream warnings. The inner wall is standard, but that outer palisade stops him cold. Interlocking logs, precise angles, professional military engineering using techniques that don't belong here, from somewhere beyond the known world. Then comes the moment that will haunt historians forever. Cavalry rides out first, noise and dust, but the infantry that follows marches impossibly tight. Shields interlock. Men move as one organism. Synchronized drills, not tribal chaos, but regimented precision of empire-level military training. This shouldn't exist here. Nomadic armies don't have professional heavy infantry. This speaks of institutional warfare from somewhere far across the world. Are these Romans? The lost legionaries from Crassus's disaster, 17 years unable to erase decades of training? Chen Tang will never know. What he knows, they're trained, professional, and defending the fortress he needs to destroy. He has the most devastating weapon in the ancient world. Chen Tang orders his crossbowmen forward. The first volley of crossbow bolts turns the sky dark. The soldiers retreat into the fortress, professionals recognizing overwhelming firepower. War drums thunder. The Han army launches coordinated assault from every direction. Garrison troops advance behind massive shields. Crossbowmen rain bolts without pause. Auxiliary forces fill the moat, blockade gates. Defenders are systematically eliminated. Whatever training these foreign soldiers received, Roman, Greek, Bactrian, it wasn't designed for this. Mediterranean tactics assumed certain weapon capabilities, certain ranges. Han crossbows operate on different principles: higher draw weights, mechanical advantage, armor piercing at impossible ranges. The wooden palisade becomes a trap when the Han bring firewood and set it ablaze. Smoke pours into the fortress. the defenses become an oven. At night, wounded and desperate, Zhiji attempts a cavalry charge. Waiting crossbow volleys annihilate them in darkness. Zhiji himself, face streaming blood from an arrow wound, fights on the walls alongside his armed wives. Most die around him. By midnight, the outer wall is consumed by fire. A relief force of 10,000 Kangju cavalry arrives, launches charges. But cavalry charging into prepared crossbow positions are simply moving targets. After devastating casualties, they flee. At dawn, the final assault begins. Han soldiers swarm over weakened walls. Street fighting follows, brutal, personal. But there are too few defenders, too many attackers. Zhiji retreats to his palace, still fighting. Han soldiers pursue relentlessly. In the final melee, Zhiji is mortally wounded and beheaded. The first and only Xiongnu supreme ruler killed in battle by Han forces. Final count: 1,518 enemy killed, 145 captured alive. Were they the last echoes of Carrhae? The final Romans, 17 years from disaster? The prisoners are sent to Chang'an as trophies. Han records don't identify them as special, just foreign mercenaries. China has no concept of Rome. Rome has no concept of China. The two greatest empires in human history exist in complete mutual ignorance. The evidence remains tantalizing but incomplete. The wooden palisade, the infantry formations, the synchronized drilling, Pliny's mention of Romans in Margiana. But other explanations exist. The Seleucid Empire spread Greek military techniques across Central Asia for centuries. Modern DNA studies show no Roman ancestry. The theory was popularized by historian Homer Dubs in the 1940s. It remains one of history's most compelling mysteries and most disputed. What we know for certain, in 36 BC, two military systems developed on opposite sides of Eurasia met in combat. The defenders lost. Whether they were Romans, Hellenized Central Asians, or another group, they died so far from home their names weren't recorded. No monuments, no honors. Chen Tang's career swings between glory and disgrace. The emperor grants him nobility, but Confucian officials attack his corruption. Stripped, imprisoned, reinstated. His declaration echoes through history. Let those who dare challenge the great Han be hunted down no matter how far they run. But the battle's true legacy isn't military. It's the haunting possibility that somewhere in that burning fortress, Carrhae's echoes finally fell silent. 10,000 Romans marched into captivity in 53 BC. 145 foreign soldiers emerged from flames in 36 BC. Between those moments lies mystery. A journey so improbable it took 2,000 years for anyone to ask. What happened to Crassus's lost legion? Perhaps the answer burned in an impossible fortress at the edge of the known world, where two empires collided without learning each other's names. 2,000 years later, we're still wondering what Chen Tang truly saw when those gates opened. Soldiers from beyond the maps. The fortress shouldn't have existed. The battle shouldn't have happened. The mystery shouldn't endure, but it does.